Ladies and gentlemen, Colin from the Motorcycle Action Group.
That's correct, yes.
Round of applause, please. So, we've just had we've done what I always do in videos, which is we have a really good chat beforehand, and now we've got to try and capture that on video. But what we've surmised on this beautiful winter's day is that the official government stance on motorbikelists is that they would kind of like to ignore you and ideally have you just go away.
Yes, we're certainly an inconvenience. We do exist, but frankly, it's a bit of a bother, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'd be life would be so much better for everybody if we didn't exist.
Well, it would just save them having to think about you. Not that they do think about motorcyclists much at all.
Well, exactly. I mean, you talk about government overspending all the time. I mean, how much money would they save if they didn't need to generate policy for motorcycling?
Yeah. How much money do you think the government spend on motorcyclists?
It's somewhere between none and a bit less.
Yeah. We were just chatting about this, and you think, I can't think of a single thing that has ever even been said about motorcyclists, let alone a piece of infrastructure or legislation or anything. They really do just ignore you, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at something like capital expenditure on things like road infrastructure or something like that, you'll hear stories in the press on a virtually daily basis about a junction being redesigned for the safety of cyclists. But when was the last time you heard them say, well, we're going to redesign it for the safety of motorcyclists? It just doesn't happen. We'll see cycle lanes put in across the country, God knows how many billions of pounds being spent on it, but not a penny is spent to make the road safer for a motorcyclist. So it is a case of you will always find the exception that proves the rule. I'm sure somebody will give you a comment in your video saying, oh yes, but I know they spent 50p on a new bit of paint on the road where I live. But realistically, in real terms, there's nothing being spent.
There we go, look at that, we're 3 minutes in and we have a challenge for you if you're watching. Tell us something that the government have done for motorcyclists. That would be great.
Yeah, something positive.
Something positive, yeah. So, bit of background then. Motorcycle Action Group, we're going to do a bit of background on Motorcycle Action Group, talk about what they've been up to, talk about some of the threats that are facing motorcycling, talk a little bit about electric bikes, and have a bit of a run around the houses on how you got involved, and that's sort of where we're at. So tell us about the history of the Motorcycle Action Group.
History of the Motorcycle Action Group got started long before I was involved, so don't quiz me too much. There will be aficionados out there who will be able to correct everything that I get wrong. But we were formed in 1973, originally to oppose the mandatory crash helmet laws. That means that we carry with us a certain amount of baggage in that everybody thinks that we're opposed to crash helmets. We're not opposed to crash helmets. We're for pro-choice, freedom of choice. Let an adult make his own decision about his own safety. So it was very much an ideological stance that we were taking right from the get-go. Obviously, as we can see, we were totally victorious in opposing the mandatory crash helmet law.
Yeah, that worked.
Nobody in this country is legally required to wear a crash helmet, as you can tell. So yeah, we were off to a flying start from day one.
So you're a pro-danger organisation. No, but okay, so I wasn't really aware of this. Where did the crash helmet stuff come from then? At what point did the government start stepping in and saying we must protect the lives of motorcyclists? That's got to have come from somewhere.
Yeah, obviously it comes from concerns about road safety. Obviously at that time, growing concern about road safety, the number of fatalities on the road, and there's no denying that motorcyclists do represent quite a large proportion of the motorcycle of casualties on the road in the UK. So again, it's a bit like you were discussing with Adrian the other day. They did what was easy rather than what was right, and says, well, the easy thing is, we know that already 80% of motorcyclists wear a crash helmet. If we just close the gap and say, okay, 100% of motorcyclists wear a crash helmet, obviously that's going to improve road safety. You can make the arguments. I don't think that there was any significant change in the road casualty statistics as a result. You can't deny, though, that crash helmets will have saved people's lives. So it's one of those, did it work, didn't it work? Something that we'll never really know the answer to.
But the big thing was, from the MAG's point of view, it was never about the crash helmet, but it was about our ability to not to have that choice taken away from us by overbearing government legislation. And I think people probably look at that and think, that's crazy. Why would you want to go out without a crash helmet? But it's really not about that. It's about preventing the creep of further punitive legislation, basically.
Yeah, that's it. It's basically, I mean, the thin end of the wedge kind of argument, or the long slippery slope argument, however you want to describe it, is that basically if you start regulating from one thing, then the natural next step is to regulate the next thing, or to mandate the next thing. So, for example, obviously in the UK currently the only legal requirement is a crash helmet. But already in France, they've introduced a legal requirement for CE-rated gloves to be worn on motorcycles. So you can see it's going to be easy for the next steps to be coming down the tubes.
Yeah.
If we hadn't stood up and made such a fuss about the crash helmet law, I'm pretty sure we would be an awful lot further down the route in terms of mandating gloves, boots, armoured jackets, things like that. And again, that's not to say that those things are not good safety measures. They do help to reduce injuries, they do help to save lives. But again, it comes down to this question of freedom of choice, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
As adults in a society, we should have the right to make our own decisions. So long as we understand and accept the risks, it's our decision whether or not to take those risks.
Yeah, understanding the risks is key, and the crash helmet one is pretty obvious. Right, I'm just going to drop the there's my keys. I'm going to drop the rear windows because we're steaming up. How many members do you think Motorcycle Action Group have got, and what are the sort of key challenges that you're facing at the minute?
Currently, in terms of membership numbers, it depends how you count it. If you look at the fully signed up individual members, we've got 8,000 to 8,500 members at the moment. But we also count affiliated members who are members of motorcycle clubs, which we can then claim another 100,000.
So you're pretty well known.
We're well known, well established. Obviously, we're in 51st year now, aren't we? So it's one of those things that we are well known, but sometimes you do wonder why we're not better known. It is a case of we can still meet motorcyclists who say never heard of MAG before. And some, when you look at the age of some of these people, you do kind of have to question whether or not they've been living under a rock.
Like we were saying in there, 1.4 million motorcyclists, is it?
That's correct, yeah.
And 3 million registered motorcycles.
Yeah.
Because everybody has more than one. You have to.
Yeah, but don't tell anybody. If you want to increase the numbers, you say there's over 3 million motorcycles registered in the country. If you want to deflate the numbers, you say there's a 1.4 million regular riders.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, the optimum number of motorcycles to own is the amount that you own plus one, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. You've never got enough motorcycles.
Yeah, exactly. But it's that sort of. There's a bit of a hoarding mentality within motorcycles. So maybe let us know in the comments how many you've got, because I know I can think of about 6 people off the top of my head just from my social network who own more than one motorbike.
Yes.
So there's a lot of bikes out there. But do you think, okay, so there's two sides of this. Motorcycling is not a real form of transport, it's just a hobby, and apathy. So talk to us about those two things, because in the old days a motorbike would be your main form of transport, and that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, when you look at the history of motorcycling in the UK, there have been periods of time, I think it was between the war years, something like late 20s, something like that, where there were double the number of motorcycles on the road compared to cars.
Yeah.
So the obvious reason for that is that the motorcycle was a cheaper form of transport than the motor car. So initially, everybody gravitated to what they could afford. Over a period of time, obviously, cars became proportionally cheaper and more affordable for the masses, and obviously the comfort and the laziness and the sloth and the general degeneracy of the human population led everybody to get into cars. The few of us who remained fit, agile, lithe people like me continued to ride motorcycles.
The thinking man's form of transport.
Absolutely, yes. We are the superior form of transport that everybody's forgotten about. Over a period of time, motorcycling relatively has become more expensive in some cases than driving a car. There are obviously to be fair to the motor car, it does provide more flexibility in terms of the range of things that you can do with a car compared to a motorcycle. You've got a relatively small vehicle. Carrying home a chest of drawers from IKEA on the back of a motorcycle isn't really going to happen, but you can probably do it with a car.
It's not advisable. I mean, it's pretty doable.
Well, say if you see some videos from India and places like that.
Mind you, you're talking about
people doing it.
You're talking about growing your YouTube channel. I mean, there's a challenge that you could start with. You know, can you do it? We'll do a collaboration video. I'll bring a Volvo, right? You bring a motorbike. We'll both buy each other a present in IKEA. But no, seriously, I think there is people look at the motorbike as just something you take out on a Sunday, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be protected as a hobby. And there are still people that use them day to day, because we're not just talking about, you know, super bikes that go out once a week. Under your remit comes all the people that use them for work and all the people that are using them for scooter deliveries and all that sort of stuff. It all fits under that banner of you want to help maintain their ability to do so.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when you look at official government figures, and this is often quoted by the Motorcycle Industry Association, is that 60% of motorcycle journeys are utility. The rest is leisure. I always look at it as probably they're all leisure, but they're trying to squeeze a little bit of utility out of it while they're having their fun. So it is a case of, I think, motorcycling generally these days, you've got to be an enthusiast to put up with all the regulation and all the drag factors that are included with motorcycling. So you've got to be passionate about riding motorcycles, whereas driving a car, it really is more of a necessity. So there is that difference. The reality is, though, that we can prove historically that utility use of motorcycles does have potential. Certainly, if you've got everybody who only rides a bike for leisure purposes to use it to commute to work, that is going to have a big impact on the roads and the congestion in this country. The reality is that people won't use their motorcycle because it is made far too difficult. I mean, yes, you can make the climate argument in terms of, it rains a lot and you get wet and all that, but if the cycle lobby come up against that kind of argument, they just say, well, we need showers and changing facilities at work. But nobody suggests that for a motorcyclist. So it's one of these that, again, there's this difference in terms of how the mode is accepted and included within transport policy.
And we're now swaying into the sort of next part of this video where we talk about why is it that cyclists and motorcyclists can't get along and work together. So let's talk about bus lanes. So recently there was no, let me get this right. It wasn't a consultation, was it?
It was a consultation.
It was a consultation on whether or not motorcycles should be allowed to go in bus lanes. Now, to throw in my 2 pence as a car driver and someone that no longer has a motorbike license because my CBT expired, I would have said it was a no-brainer that bikes were okay to go in a bus lane. But that's not what happened.
We should be careful in saying that this was about default access. So don't think that the outcome of this consultation means that you can no longer ride in bus lanes. There are bus lanes in this country that you can still use. That situation hasn't changed to what it was before the consultation. What we were arguing for was that the default position should be that motorcycles are allowed in bus lanes, as opposed to that being the exception. So it is slightly a nuanced argument. But in terms of bus lanes, obviously the whole idea of bus lanes is to expedite buses through congested city centres and such like, so that you can get regular public transport provision that everybody wants to use. So no particular argument with that. The problem is, from are you talking about the difference between cycling and motorcycling? From the get-go with bus lanes, cyclists were allowed default access.
So the default position for cyclists is you can go in the bus lane.
That's it. So if there's no signage saying one way or the other, as a cyclist, you can use the bus lane. For the motorcyclist, the default position is you cannot use the bus lane unless there's a symbol on the sign saying that you can. So from the get-go, cyclists were given default access. There was never a trial. There was never any monitoring of the safety of it. Everybody just accepted the argument that cyclists as vulnerable road users needed to be given a little bit of separation from the general traffic in the congested car lanes. The problem is, motorcyclists are equally vulnerable road users, but we are not afforded the same benefit that cyclists were given by default. So we've had to argue local authority by local authority, bus lane by bus lane, to gain access. Every local authority then says, well, if we're going to do this, first of all, we've got to do a trial to make sure that it is safe.
Yeah.
They never did a trial for cyclists.
No.
They only do the trial for motorcyclists. Now, in this country at the minute, I think it's 56 or 57 local authorities that do allow access for motorcycles in bus lanes. Each one of those has done their own trial, spending hundreds of thousands of public money to establish whether or not it was safe and viable to do. Overwhelmingly, all these trials said yes, it is safe to do it, and so our argument is, well, we're now in this critical mass. We've got 48% of bus lanes in the country that you can access. We should just make this the default position, because at the minute you've got this crazy patchwork. If you go across London, for example, TfL, Transport for London, they allow access to all their bus lanes.
Yeah.
But there's, I forget the exact numbers, but a proportion of the 30 boroughs that do allow motorcycle access in their bus lanes, and then there's a proportion that don't.
Really?
Which means that, yes, you can literally be on the same bus lane, cross a border from one borough to the next, and all of a sudden you're breaking the law.
Wow.
It is that crazy. I mean, locally for us, if you look in Birmingham City Council allow access to bus lanes for motorcycles. Sandwell Council don't. The Hagley Road going into Birmingham, the right hand side as you're going into Birmingham, the right hand side of the road is Birmingham City Council, the left hand is Sandwell. So you're not allowed to use the bus lane going in, but you can use the bus lane coming out. It's madness, it's just total lunacy, this patchwork policy. And in effect, that creates more of a safety risk for motorcyclists, because you're spending all your time checking the signs to see whether or not you're allowed to use the road, as opposed to whether or not there's a car about to pull out in front of you.
Yeah.
So it increases the risk, in my view.
Or you might be so busy concentrating on the bus lane signs that you miss the cyclist who's pulling out because he's reached the end of a bike lane.
Yeah.
And you might knock a cyclist off.
Yeah, that's it. And again, traditionally the cycle lobby has been opposed to motorcycles being allowed into the bus lanes. So people like British Cycling, they've got it on their website that it's their policy that they oppose motorcycle access in bus lanes.
Is that because they're jealous? Is it?
It wouldn't be right for me to say. Obviously, they are significantly concerned about their membership, their cycling buddies, and more importantly, people who they're trying to persuade to take up cycling. What they're saying is that it is scary for a cyclist to be overtaken by a motorcycle in a bus lane. They don't appear to recognise the fact that it might be scary to be overtaken by a bus or a taxi in the bus lane, but being overtaken by a motorcycle in the bus lane is sufficiently scary. It's going to put people off riding push bikes.
I think they're jealous because they know deep down that motorbikes are better than bicycles.
As I always say, the motorcycle is the superior
form of transport. But I just find it quite pathetic. The fact that the cycling thing has gone a bit crazy, and yet a motorcycle, I mean, the clue's in the word, they're the same thing except one's got a motor, and yet you have no rights, no ability to go anywhere. They get their own cycle lanes everywhere, they steal car lanes everywhere, and they're clearly allowed in bus lanes. I'd rather be on a bicycle being overtaken by a motorbike than having a bus try to go around me. But what do I know? Yeah,
you would think so. And again, I think the fundamental difference between the cycle lobby and the motorcycle lobby is that the cycle lobby is evangelical. They believe that everybody should be riding a push bike. The motorcyclists, the motorcycle lobby, basically take the view is, if you want to ride a motorcycle, great, we welcome you and we'll embrace you and we will support you, but we know it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
There are risks involved. We understand that. We accept those risks. We understand that some people will not consider those risks to be acceptable. So we are not evangelical. We're not trying to say that everybody should ride a motorcycle. What we're saying is that anybody who wants to, who accepts the risks and understands the risks fully and still chooses to do it, they should be supported and they should have their lives made a little bit easier than they currently are. So yeah, we're effectively not asking for enough. We're not militant enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the bikers out there, get more militant, because you're clearly not militant enough.
You're all too relaxed Whereas, and I think this has been the problem with cycling. The rise of the militant cyclist has been a bit strange to watch, because you've got people now. Do you know what I think it is? I think it's the sort of people that they use LinkedIn, the social media network, and they post on it, and they have got to a stage where cycling has become their whole identity. And because cycling is their whole identity, they've found a whole new purpose in life by pushing that identity on others, which is stuff that we see elsewhere in the world as well. But I find it odd that motorbikelists just get completely overlooked in everything. Let's talk about electric bikes, because we had a funny conversation.
Must we?
Yeah, let's talk about electric bikes. So I've just bought an electric motorcycle, and I'm going to go and charge it at the new. In fact, I'm going to Motorcycle Live. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my electric motorcycle to Motorcycle Live at the NEC, and I'm going to go and charge it at the NEC car park. Now, you found a problem with that, didn't you?
I did, yes. As I say, all this charging infrastructure is designed for people who drive cars. It is not designed for people who ride motorcycles. So if you want to use the charging hub at the NEC, which is, I think, if not still, it certainly was when it was opened, the largest charging hub in the country, opened by, they had Chancellor Leach come to cut the ribbon and do all the photo opportunities. The local mayor, Andy Street, was there. It was a big news event. So
my electric friend Lee went there.
He was there as well, was he?
He was very excited about going to this big new charging place.
I'm sure he was.
But anyway, if you're on a motorbike...
Yes, so the problem is, to use any of those charging bays, you need to book in advance. Now, that in itself isn't a big problem. It may be a little bit of an inconvenience, I suppose, if you're just turning up on spec, but you can, literally park outside, book it, and drive straight in. The problem is, to gain access to the site, you have to go through a barrier, which is ANPR controlled. And of course, the ANPR camera is facing at the front of the vehicle. The one place that a motorcycle does not have a number plate is on the front. So unless all the bikers on their electric bikes are going to ride up and waddle backwards through the barriers, they ain't getting in. It's
going to be an awkward backwards waddle on your electric Harley. I mean, how much does the electric Harley weigh?
I shudder to think, but it's one of these things that I don't actually know the numbers on it, but they certainly are not going to be a lightweight machine.
No.
And going backwards, they don't have a reverse gear.
No, so you are shuffling.
If you drop it, you're not going to be picking it up in a hurry.
We've come up with 2 brilliant video ideas for your channel today. So we're going to do the IKEA challenge, and then you're going to borrow an electric Harley and go charge it at the NEC. I'm looking forward to filming your backwards waddle so that the camera can pick up your number plate. But it's not
the problem is, can we get this past health and safety?
It might be an issue. Yeah, we need a helmet. But it's not just that, is it? So charging points now. We're actually sat next to 2 charging points right now. There's space there for 2 cars as we watch these people struggle with charging their car. You could get a lot of motorbikes there.
Yep.
So they need more cables, but that's not even considered by any of the charging people.
No, as I say, when I went up to take a look at this charging hub at the NEC, quite by chance I bumped into the guy who designed and installed it.
Yeah.
He agreed to be interviewed on video, and you can see that video on the MAG YouTube channel. Please do subscribe.
Link below.
I obviously had a chat with him first, pretty much the same as we've done. This is the kind of thing that I want to cover. But in the conversation, it became apparent that he hadn't got a clue about electric motorcycles. His first question was, well, are there any electric motorcycles? Which, you think, well, you're the guy who's supposed to be providing the infrastructure for us, and you don't know if there are any electric motorcycles. So he did a quick bit of research on his mobile phone, and obviously came up with the Harley Livewire. That was the only bike that he knew about as an electric motorcycle. So all his answers were based on 2 minutes of research on the phone before we started the camera rolling. And his response was, what you need to do if you want to get motorcycle charging put in place properly is you need to persuade all the local biker cafes to start asking for charging hubs to be set up on their premises. But again, when you stop and think about it, the whole point of integrating motorcycles into general transport is that we're going to go to the same place as everybody else.
Yeah.
We're not only going to go to the biker cafe. But if you want to use your motorcycle to go to work or to go shopping in the town centre or whatever it may be, you need charging infrastructure there too, don't you? But it's only being provided for the cars, not for the motorcycles.
And that makes it all backwards then, because the government announced that motorcycle sales must be X% electric by X year, but you as the customer has to advocate for where you need the chargers for the bikes that the government have forced you to purchase.
That's it.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
Like I say, common sense and government are not things that go together very often.
No.
And certainly when it comes to charging infrastructure, it hasn't gone through at all, has it?
Less so. They're still struggling with getting that car charged, aren't they? It's. I could camp out here all day and just watch people, because it just looks painful.
But the thing is, they do say, don't they, that new car sales, it is generally old people that buy new cars.
Yeah.
And let's face it, which is the group of people that are least likely to understand the technology that's involved,
it's old people
with touch screens to do your charging. You know, it's like the whole thing is sort of like not well thought out from start to finish.
We've got some major problems coming up with Motability, I think, because Motability are pushing people that really shouldn't have electric cars into electric cars. That's a whole conversation for another day. So electric bikes then, Harley make one. I assume your big manufacturers, your Yamahas, your Kawasaki's, are they launching one? They're not.
They're just on the cusp of doing it. I think Kawasaki have got some models out. There's all the promises that they're going to be bringing out all these electric motorcycles. The reality is, I think the mainstream manufacturers are basically saying the technology isn't right at the moment to provide the kind of bikes that customers want to buy.
Yeah.
It is, and again, we've been through all the consultation process with the government about ending the sale of internal combustion engine motorcycles. When you sit in the room with a government minister and all the heads of the major manufacturers, almost all of them are saying the technology isn't there yet. We can do it for small bikes, that's great, but for the bigger bikes, which is a large part of the UK market, the technology just isn't right yet. So I think the reality is that the mainstream manufacturers are basically saying it's too early to go with anything like that. We're going to lose our shirts. So we're reliant upon Chinese or startup businesses. The main sort of most recognised electric motorcycle in the UK is probably the Zero. So that's, again, it's a separate company. They only make electric motorcycles, and they are probably the most frequently seen electric motorcycles in the UK at the moment, other than possibly the little scooters and such like. But yeah, for what our membership would view as a motorcycle, for a full license holder, the Zero is probably the most popular. Yeah. But again, when you look at the sales figures, they're minute. Yeah. And declining. So yeah, it's not something that is taking off. You speak to any biker at a bike show, if you can find one who's excited about electric motorcycles, you're doing really well. If you're excited about electric motorcycles, please leave a comment and let us know. And it has to be said that we are not opposed to electric motorcycles. Like I say, I campaign for better charging infrastructure for electric motorcycles. It is a case of, we're not saying that people shouldn't, but the reality is the market just isn't accepting them at the moment. That may change over time, but it should be down to the market to decide. It shouldn't be down to the government. I feel like the electric motorcycle makes more sense than the electric car, because it's more in line with what I thought electric cars were going to be about, which is small, more affordable transport for people. Whereas we know from all of my content that we've done on electric cars that really it's about who can have the biggest SUV with the biggest price tag. But I really thought like electric motorcycles might actually work, but I don't think I've ever even seen one. Yeah, I mean, again, some of it may be that you've seen one and don't realise that it's electric. I think there is certainly a space in the small, effectively 50cc moped equivalent. Yeah. I think in that space there is a good argument for electric. The reality is that you wouldn't be using that kind of 50cc moped to ride from here to Cornwall. Yeah. It's got a limited market. It's great for inner city use. For somebody who lives in the city and only needs to get from one side of the city to the other, I can see that working. But the majority, as I say, the majority of bikers, what is left of biking, that isn't the scene. The scene is going out twisted country lanes, having fun at the weekend. That isn't going to cut through there. I mean, mag run rallies And we often argue, you know, how the hell are we going to get a large number of electric bikes to come to a mag rally? We'll have to set up a diesel generator in the middle of the field to charge all those electric bikes.
That's right. If you're going to have a run out to Brecon, you're going to need to take a trailer with a generator at the halfway point, because it doesn't work. Because again, if you start talking about where do the chargers need to be, you have to say, well, where do bikers go? And if you map that as a heat map, well, bikers like to go to more remote places because the roads are nicer and it's scenic. So we're going to need to put chargers there. So then we're going to need to put cables in there. It's not going to work.
But then again, you've also, this comes back to the bus lane question, doesn't it? It's like, why is it then that in city centres where the electric motorcycle probably makes most sense, they won't actually accommodate us by making it safer for us by allowing us to use the bus lanes? So yeah, it's hardly surprising that bikers as a group see the government as either thick as two short planks or anti-motorcyclist. It's got to be one or the other. It can't, it can't be both. Well, I suppose it can be, but the reality is there is no good answer for what the government is doing.
And you did say as well that what was it to do with all the transport plans? And there was all those transport plans and the word motorcycle was never mentioned.
Yeah, that's it. So nationally, obviously the country is split up into local transport authorities, basically your councils. Each one of those is legally required to produce a local transport plan, which is their plan for how they're going to make transport work in their area. We've done the analysis and done the research with the University of Nottingham, so this is totally unbiased. It's not just me trying to find an argument. The analysis shows that 1 in 4 local transport plans do not mention the fact that motorcycles exist, so they're not covered at all. So if you've got a transport planner whose sole job is to make sure that every part of the transport system is working efficiently and well, how can you have 1 in 4 of them not even noticing the fact that motorcycles exist? And we have no hope of getting a sensible policy in this country while this situation persists.
And again, it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the policy that we've got coming at motorists is done on the back of safety and keeping people safe. And you've got Vision Zero, which is about we want to have no, I've done a video about this before, we want to have no road deaths. That's where we want to be. So what they're doing in order to get no road deaths is they've got a portion of the motoring world, which is the motorbikers, and the motorbikers make up, what was it,
0.8% of the vehicle miles that travelled in the UK each year are on a motorcycle.
0.8%. So they've got a section of the motoring society here that do 0.8% of the miles on the road, but make up a much higher number and are 50 times more likely to be killed on the road. So they've got 0.8% of the people who are getting killed 50 times more, but they don't want to come and talk to you. They don't want to put any money into it, and for the most part they don't want to acknowledge that you exist. I think I found an answer here. If we genuinely want to keep people safe, right, and if we genuinely want to decrease road deaths, someone should come and have a word with you.
Absolutely. And I can assure you that anybody that does come and have a word with me, I've got some answers. So it's not difficult to do. This is unfortunately the problem, is that although Vision Zero, it claims to be the vision of zero casualties for everybody, what they mean is it's zero casualties for everybody who's making the right transport choice.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so Vision Zero, really. And again, we discussed this whilst having a coffee. The only way you can absolutely ensure that there's no deaths on the road is to get everybody off the road. How can we stop motorcyclists getting killed?
So there's lots of things to do. I mean, first of all, the training and testing procedure at the minute in this country is not as good as it could be. Can we just explain to people that don't know how you get your motorbike license, just real quickly, in the UK? Off the top of my head, it's really complicated.
It is, because it changes by age, it changes by engine size. You can do direct access.
That's it. Yeah. This is the thing. If you look at the Department for Transport website and ask it, how do you get a driving license, they come up with 3 steps.
Yeah.
If you ask it, how do you get a motorcycle license, it's a 5-page flowchart. That's not an exaggeration. Go and have a look it up and see. It depends on your age, it depends on your inside leg measurement, it depends on what size bike you're riding. You've got obviously the CBT, you've got A1, A2, full A license, you can do direct access. There's 101 different permutations and combinations. Getting from an A1 to an A2 or an A2 to an A1 license just means retaking the same test, just for the hell of it. As far as we can tell, there's no extra training or requirements. So yeah, the way that it is set up, it is overly complicated. It confuses people, and needless to say, it also costs a lot more than it does to get a driving license.
It probably puts people off as well.
So yeah, unsurprisingly, the vast majority of people will go and get a car and drive that as opposed to ride a motorcycle.
But even thinking about it now, the CBT thing doesn't make sense, does it? Because you could do your CBT, which is compulsory basic training,
yeah,
and that is your basic training to ensure that you're safe with riding a motorbike, and then it expires after a year?
It's 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
So they're assuming that in 2 years you've forgotten all of your ability to ride a motorbike and need to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about that. It doesn't make sense, does it?
Yeah, and that's it. And like I say, delivery riders, if you've seen a delivery rider who hasn't got an L plate on, you're a better man than me. The reality is, the most dangerous transport mode in the country is the only mode for which you do not need a full license to do it as a job. It's like, say, you couldn't be a taxi driver on L plates, you couldn't drive a delivery van on L plates, but you can ride a motorcycle on L plates because that's 50 times more likely to get you killed.
And it's not even just on L plates, is it? Because if you're learning to drive a car, let's say each lesson is an hour long, and you're supposed to be supervised when you're running around on L plates, but a CBT is what, a morning and an afternoon?
Yeah, and again, the standards of CBT provision is a little bit questionable. I've heard stories of people who literally have ridden off the road through a hedge and still been given their CBT certificate at the end of the day. So yeah, the quality of the CBT is questionable. Again, in this digital age, they do not hold digital records of who holds a CBT certificate, which means that if the police want to check it, they have to ring up the DVSA, who have to go to a filing cabinet to see whether or not there's a CBT certificate. So a lot of the riders, especially the delivery riders, I think there's a fair amount of people who don't actually have a CBT.
All of which backs up the fact that the government either just actively ignore you or just want to pretend that you exist.
Yeah.
So again, if we want to dive into the figures of the number of people that are getting hurt and injured on our roads, we've got to start looking at, well, you need to go into the qualitative data. Mm-hmm. So how many people were killed because he was out on a 1000cc superbike and he was being silly, versus how many people are just not doing the correct amount of basic training, running around with an incorrect or expired CBT on a bike that they are not insured for business use.
Yep.
Because if you follow these pages on Facebook where the police post up who they've nicked and for what, the amount of times you see that they've seized a moped that's running around on L plates where the guy's CBT is expired, he hasn't got proper insurance, and his tyres are down to the cords.
Yep.
There's so much of this going on because it's too easy.
Yeah, exactly. They make it easier to be illegal than they should make it easier to be legal. The reality is, I mean, I've looked into exploring the connection between motorcycle theft and motorcycle road casualties. So, for example, in London in 2023, there were 21 motorcycle fatalities. Right. Of those, 5 of those were linked to a stolen motorcycle. So that's sort of like, you know, in the region of 25% of fatalities are actually linked to extreme illegal behaviour because they've stolen the bike. That's before you look at whether or not they'd got a license, whether or not they got an MOT, yeah, whether or not it was road legal. All these questions sort of like point to the fact that we're kind of doing what is easy rather than what is right. We should be encouraging people to ride safely and well, but we don't even know what the casualty statistics are for genuine, yeah, safe riders.
It's so interesting
that all
the
numbers get thrown into one big pot.
Exactly.
Those are bikers, those are the lunatics that we really don't want to address. We would rather they didn't exist. It's all bad. Let's just ignore them.
Which is exactly the same as what Adrian was saying, in that you look at the speeding statistics and say, right, there's been X amount of speeding, and as a result of that, we're going to do Y to everyone. When some of the cases of speeding were stolen motorbikes, stolen cars, people involved in things that they shouldn't be, people with no insurance. And when you dive down into the qualitative data, There shouldn't be this blanket application of everything to the man who wants to do, or woman who wants to do things right. So if you do want to do your proper training and have proper insurance and make sure you're doing things properly, you're lumped in the same banner as everybody else who's not, because the government never want to look at the qualitative side.
Yeah,
I can't believe that statistic, that out of 21 deaths, 5 were to do with stolen motorbikes.
Yeah, and again, it's something like it goes through into when you look at things like advanced training. So obviously post-test training, there's a far higher percentage of motorcyclists who take post-test training than car drivers.
Yeah.
This is, again, it totally blows out of the water the myth that motorcyclists are sort of like, risk takers and just out to kill themselves, and all these comments that come out. The reality is that we understand that there's risks, we accept that those risks, and we do everything we can to manage those risks. And that mindset is there. So when you look at legitimate riders, the kind of people that we represent, I think the statistics are so totally skewed as to be meaningless. And like I say, you look at these numbers. On the one hand, you think, well, it's a big number, therefore the government should be taking notice and doing something about it. The reality is, 50 times difference between a car and a motorcycle in terms of your risk of dying, and yet the government doesn't seem to care. They don't want to do anything about it. And then when you get into the weeds of it, if they do decide to do something, the most likely lever they're likely to reach for is banning and restricting motorcycling. They're not going to look at how do we make the good riders better, and how do we protect those good riders by making sure that the idiots are not involved.
Exactly. When a good rider is probably the best car driver, because when a car driver jumps in their car and says, I'm going to drive to the shops, they just do it. When a motorcyclist jumps on a motorbike and says, I'm going to ride to the shops, and on the way everybody's going to try and kill me.
That's it.
So you're traveling in a much more conscious manner, which again is in line with what Adrian's saying about space and awareness and everything, not just the speed.
The fundamental principle when it comes to motorcycle safety, the thing that we've been taught and had hammered to us throughout the decades, is that you ride defensively. You assume that everybody else is going to make a mistake, because ultimately they will make their mistakes whether you realise it or not. If you're prepared for them, you might be able to avoid the collision. When you look at things like the recent changes to the highway code, for example, they've done the opposite, haven't they? They've said, well, because the car driver is in a bigger vehicle, it is therefore more his responsibility to look out for the vulnerable road user than the other way around. That totally contradicts what we've been teaching riders, is that you're vulnerable, accept the fact, and you better bloody look out. Because car drivers are going to make mistakes. It's not that they're doing it deliberately, necessarily. It's that mistakes happen. We all accept that fact. But, if you get into one of those collisions where it's a mistake, the only outcome is going to be you're going to get hurt. It's not going to be the person in the car that gets hurt.
But we may have a new crop of riders coming through who are riding along thinking, if I get hit, then it's not my fault.
Exactly. And again, unfortunately, I hate to sort of like point towards the cycle lobby, but that is their mentality, isn't it? It's a case of, I can ride straight along up the left-hand side of a car that's turning left, and it's his fault. Well, that's great, it's his fault, but you're the one who's in the ambulance on the way to hospital.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Is there any, if you could click your fingers and make a change in the motorcycling world to make motorcycling more accessible or safer or better, what would you, with your magic wand, do? Do you want, would it be a motorcycle lane? Would it be better education? Or what do you think would really make a difference?
Funnily enough, what would really make a difference would be electing a biker to be Prime Minister. It needs policy to fully embrace motorcycling. We are generally opposed to segregation of road space. So there's no appetite amongst motorcyclists to have motorcycle lanes, for example. Yes, we want access to the bus lanes, but that's not because we think it's a motorcycle lane. It's just that it's a bit of road space that allows us to create a little bit of distance between us and the potential collision. So we can use it if we need to. Not necessarily, there was one bus lane trial in Nottingham, for example. They failed it because they said that although they were given, on this trial, they were given access to the motorcycles in the bus lanes, only 60% of the riders were using the bus lane.
Hang
on a minute. they don't have to use the bus lane just because they've got access to it. You know, they can use the other lane if it's better for them and safer for them. If they're turning right, for example, they might want to be in the right-hand lane. So yeah, it's sort of like, it's just again this mindset is that, you know, they don't understand motorcycling, they don't understand why we do the things that we do. Until we can get to that point, you're not going to get this. There's 101 minor things that we could do, and yes, they may or may not work, and we can look at that. Unfortunately, that's the traditional way of approaching road safety. What we need is fundamental change, where there's a change in attitude towards that as a transport mode. Once we've got that, then we've got some hope of improving the statistics.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we live in a world where diversity and inclusion is encouraged everywhere, but not among road users. If you're a cyclist, you're above everybody else, but it's like the only place where diversity, equity, inclusion are not allowed. I'm victimised because I drive an old petrol Volvo, so I pay tax through the nose and I pay congestion charges, and you're victimised because nobody cares that you're a motorcyclist.
Yeah, I always find it strange that the only way that we can achieve diversity, equity and inclusion is by creating hierarchies. So basically we say somebody's more important than everybody else, and therefore that makes everybody equal.
It's funny, isn't it?
How does that work?
In order to get equality and diversity, what we first have to do is break people down into their individual groups and label them.
Yes.
It's almost like the whole thing is a scam. Have you got a favourite motorbike?
The one that I've got. Obviously, I like all bikes. I'm particularly partial to Harley Davidsons. That will get me a large amount of grief, I'm sure, now that I've admitted that in public.
I think
Chrome
just
don't get you home, I know, but I like it.
The problem is with biking, and I've always found this with bike magazines, is everybody's too focused on super bikes and getting your knee down all the time. But that's not reality for most people.
So the only time I got my knee down, it ended badly, and I wasn't intending to get my knee down.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's one of these things. There's an awful lot of banter and there's rivalry to a certain extent, but the one thing that binds everybody together is the fact that we all like motorcycles. We can all have our preferences as to which one we like and which one we prefer. It makes no difference at the end of the day. We're all bikers, so I think that creates a cohesion amongst a road user group. Unfortunately, that doesn't bring with it sufficient passion to get involved in politics. No,
that's right. And again, for a lot of people, I think they may have the attitude that, oh, well, biking is my escape from the world. You know, we go out on the Sunday on my bike and I don't have to think about all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I don't then want to think about it in the context of my hobby.
That's absolutely right. And, you know, I'm entirely on board with that. You know, the greatest release I get from the grief and the doom and the gloom that the world provides is going out on the motorbike, because when you're riding a bike, you're entirely focused on riding the bike. That's the only thing that matters. Nothing else can enter your head, otherwise you're going to end up falling off.
Yeah.
So yes, it does create that sort of like Zen-like meditation almost, in that you're focused entirely on that one operation, and all your cares in the world just fall away. So yeah, there's an awful lot of people that I think would, you know, may not state it in exactly the same way, but the same general argument is made by most bikers, I think. So yeah, I've forgotten where I was going now.
I think you were on the way into Wales at that point.
Yeah,
with the sun just coming up, headed for the beach and a fish and chip shop.
I always say the best view of Birmingham is in the rear view mirror.
I couldn't agree more with that.
So yeah, like I say, I think that there's a mindset that makes biking cohesive. But within biking, there's banter and there's subdivisions and groups, and people outside of biking just don't understand it. You know, we're all tarred with the same brush. We're all idiots. We're all criminals. We're all lunatics. It just so is not true. Yeah,
I think people would be surprised as well on what the average age of a motorcyclist actually is.
Yes, yeah, it's.
But again, that's because as well.
The latest figures is 54. They may have gone up to 55, but it is certainly getting older.
But like yourself, grew up with bikes being more of a thing, whereas for the youngsters these days, that's not really happening, is it? They're not. A bike is not the default.
I think again the problem that we see. I mean, you see lots of news reports about antisocial riding and things like that. I don't think that it's the demand has gone. It's just that demand is being channeled in a less than positive direction. So
Yeah.
so yes, you will get the antisocial riding, you'll get the kids screaming up and down in the park doing wheelies and all that kind of stuff. But that's basically because they're not being encouraged into doing it legally and safely and in a socially responsible manner.
Yeah.
We should be encouraging people into motorcycling. And again, this is the whole argument with the licensing regime, is that you're effectively pushing people away. The demand doesn't change, the demand just finds a different outlet, and unfortunately that's not a good one normally.
See, there we go. There's a great example of a motorcyclist. He's got his sidecar attached and he's got black and silver number plates, so it's a vintage bike.
Yeah.
But I think, like, when I think motorcyclist, that's the sort of thing that I think of. But you've just raised that point there. I think for a lot of the general public, when they think a motorcycle, they may see the kid up with no number plates doing a wheelie down the alleyway between two housing estates.
That's it.
So there is an image problem there with what people see and what the media portrays as a motorcyclist.
Yeah, and it's a self-reinforcing one, isn't it? It's like, because of that image, it creates that kind of behaviour, and because of that behaviour, it reinforces the image. So you've got this, vicious cycle. We need, like I say, this fundamental change in attitude. Until we get that, it's easy. It all sounds airy fairy, and it sounds like I'm a bloody politician almost. But genuinely, I believe that is what is going to make a fundamental difference, is if people can actually accept and embrace motorcycling as a good thing, as opposed to an inconvenience or a problem.
The way I see all of this and all the different groups as well, whether it's a Volvo club or motorcycles or whatever, is I want to approach it the same way you would with an endangered species. So if you've got an endangered species, there'll be an organisation that is working to protect that, but also raise awareness. And I feel like that's where it's so important that the work that you do is to protect it and to make people aware of it. And the same across all of the other hobbies that are being phased out by legislation. Because what we don't want to see is motorcyclists continuing and being apathetic, and then the government turning around and saying, actually, we feel like we're going to do X, Y, Z, and then there isn't anybody to stand up and speak on behalf of the people that have been enjoying the hobby. It's about protecting. Going back to the helmet thing, I want the freedom to be able to go and choose a motorbike. I don't want that to be taken away from me through legislation or taxation based on ridiculous net zero policies. When you look at the output of Britain in the context with the world, and even if we stop everything right now, it's not going to make any difference. But we said we weren't going to talk about that. So if people want to find out more, where can they go? Tell us your YouTube channel, tell us your website, tell them how to sign up, how much does it cost, what do they get for it, and how can they get involved? Okay, so the MAG website is www.mag-uk.org. We obviously got the YouTube channel. I honestly don't know what the handle is, but I'm sure you can link it in the thing below. They're all really looking forward to this video that we're going to do at IKEA. Yeah, you on your Harley, yeah, and me in my Volvo. Absolutely, yeah. We'll see who's got the biggest wardrobe. So yes, you can do the website, the YouTube channel. We're obviously on Facebook, we're on Twitter. I'm sure you can just search and find us quite easy. Motorcycle Action Group UK. Membership is £30 a year for a member, roughly 50p a week. It's hardly an awful lot of money. There are various deals. You can even buy life membership if you want. So yeah, what you get for that, I get a lot of people asking me, well, what do I get for it? Do I get a discount on this? Do I get an added bonus here? If you go in with that attitude, you're going in with the wrong idea. There are various discounts and things that we've got deals with Bike Shore Insurance and things like that, but to be honest, so is everybody else. So it's one of those that I would never try and sell MAG as a this is what you get in your pocket. You're a motorcyclist, we're working on your behalf. That's it. Please we are, like I say, we're trying to make sure that us motorcyclists as an endangered species get to live a little bit longer. And you also have to remember that we're a democratic organisation. So if you honestly believe that MAG is making the wrong arguments, join MAG and change the argument. We do listen to everybody's views, obviously from a motorcycling perspective. If you think that we're not quite right on any subject, let us know. Get involved. We want to hear. Get involved. There's plenty of space for people to get involved with these organisations. It's really important that if you love something, you should try and protect it. And as I said, I don't think people realise the endangered species thing is probably quite a good analogy, because yeah, it feels like we're all on borrowed time with stuff at the moment, and the more that we can do to shore up the stuff that we enjoy, the better.
That's it.
You know, motorcycling is a great release for people.
Yeah.
There's a whole load of, you know, community and getting to know people and mental health and all that stuff that goes along with motorcycling on a nice sunny day. So it's about all of it. You know, the scope of motorcycling is pretty big.
Excellent.
You may see me getting a bike at some point. A lot of people have said to me, Geoff, you should do your CBT and get a bike.
Yeah.
My wife isn't one of them, but yeah. The bikes are in the family. My dad always had bikes, and my dad said, oh, that's what we haven't talked about as well. Triumph is a great British success story.
Yeah.
Because they've kind of gone through the doldrums and they've been doing really well and making some really cool bikes, and you know, the Triumph bikes are in the Jurassic Park movies, but no one ever talks about Triumph.
No. And interesting, I say, you talk about the electric bike thing. The Triumph got a large amount of subsidy from the government to develop an electric motorcycle.
Right.
Hasn't come to market.
Ah.
Does that tell you something?
I think it does, yeah. Yeah, I think it does. Right, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. As I said, let us know what you think in the comments. Tell us what motorbike you've got, or how many. I think they should all tell us how many.
How many.
We won't tell your wife. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching.